Namaskar, Bharat. For the first time ever, we are hosting an MBA Times Fair event specifically tailored towards candidates from India. But if you're joining from any other part of the world, feel free to stay because the frameworks can still be useful to you. The series of live streams will consist less of marketing like other MBA fairs do, but more of quality content that focuses on completing important sections of your MBA application, such as your resume, essays, letters of recommendations, etc. Depending on the availability, we will dive deeper into the application of what we learn here by looking at the samples. So let's get to it. Today's school of discussion will be the Chicago Booth School of Business. And there we go. This is obviously not the Booth School of Business, but let's take the metro to Booth, and here we are. This is where you'll be if you manage to get in, and your odds are going to go up if you stay and watch the entire session till the end and wait for a little surprise before we start looking at the samples. So let's put this image in the background to keep you inspired. And let's look at the agenda for the day. Before we look at the agenda, a couple of things first. You can scan this QR code that will take you to a WhatsApp group. This WhatsApp group will serve as a medium for you to ask any questions while the session goes on, and towards the end, when we have a live Q&A, you can get those answered live as well. If you have questions later, the group can serve as a medium to have those answered too. And this eliminates the biggest problem that many people have had with the webinars, that their questions are not getting answered. And it's just a one shot off, and we just solve this problem for you. Let's look at the agenda now. We'll look at what values define the school and what the class profile is, because it will give you an understanding of what the statistical requirements to get into the program are, in addition to the personality checks the program looks for. Next, we'll look at the essays and resume, which are obviously the backbone of your application. We'll look at the LOR samples, and I will give you the tips. And it goes without saying that you will not be the one writing the LORs, so you can share the sample with someone else who will actually be writing your LORs. It will also be shared in the same Q&A chat, for which the QR code is still up for scanning. I'll wait for 5 more seconds in case you need some more time to scan this, and then we'll move on to the next slide. And I'll also share this QR code, by the way, in the very end. So make sure that you have your scanners at the ready. All right, since we're on a time crunch, let's move on. If you've missed scanning the QR code, it's fine, keep it active. We'll look at that towards the end when we have completed the resume section. The motto of Chicago Booth, our mission statement, is to create knowledge with enduring impact and educate current and future leaders. Enduring impact, that's the key word. Something that can have a lasting impact on the lives of the people. That's something to remember. Then we have the Booth's class profile, not the Booth's class profile, we have Booth's class profile. The size is at 732, which is a healthy size. This is what most programs are striving for these days, to have a class this large, which at the same time have the acceptance rate at the same. Then there is the GRE average with quant at 163 and verbal at 161. GMAT average is at 670 for the focus edition and 736 for the legacy. For the people who are from the overrepresented pool, I have already suggested that you need to have a score in the 99th percentile for the GMAT, just because that has been the trend and has been the expectation. Then there's the international student population at 46% and the work experience average at 5 years. So if you're anywhere between 3 to 7 years in the experience, it should be fine, generally speaking. But 4 to 6 is the sweet spot and 5 is obviously the place to be. International student population may also consist of dual citizens. So I don't know how many of these 46% students have dual citizenship. That's basically something to think about, because most of the schools actually club the people who are American citizens, but also have another passport of another country as international. So I don't know what that number is, but the purely international student number is generally less. We move on to the keywords next, because If you've attended any of the previous sessions, keywords help you brainstorm what stories you need to come up with. So let's see what Booth's keywords are. Enduring impact, we literally saw that in the first slide, which was about class profile and what values the school has. So enduring impact, something that lasts. So every time you look at one of these spheres, I want you to think about what exactly comes in your mind when you read a particular keyword. So if you're saying enduring impact, what kinds of stories are popping in your head, like from the past, based on what you're looking at? So that's the first thing. The second one is intellectual autonomy. You'll see actually this in essay number 2, quite honestly. But that's another keyword if you're someone who is a learner and this is something that appeals more to you. That's brilliant. Think about those things and think in those lines and write down the brainstormed story that you have in your head. Innovation, if you've attended any of the previous session, innovation has been a single one constant value that is that has been there. So innovation has to be usually there by default in all the applications, because if you're innovative, you're creative, coming up with new ideas, that's appreciated. Global community, 46% international student population obviously says that, yeah, global community is there because there's a very good ratio. Strategic mindset and navigating uncertainty, I've put that in capital, and that is not like typo of some kind that others are in small letters and those are in big letters. This is actually very special, very specific to Booth. Enduring impact is also specific to Booth, but like I have a feeling that most schools are looking for that anyway by default. So these things are something that just came across interestingly in their value system. So someone who is able to navigate uncertainty is definitely valued. I have no idea why the firecrackers are going right next to me, but I apologize for that. Strategic mindset, someone who can think strategically, because I think Chicago Booth's Chicago approach, or like the flexi curriculum that they have, does require some sort of an understanding. And if you're someone who can think strategically, someone who is intentional, someone who can navigate uncertain situation with ease, you would be a Booth student. So that's basically it with the keywords. And if anything pops in your head when you look at a particular keyword, always think in those lines and something will pop up. Chicago Booth essays are the next. Actually, I like Chicago Booth's essays because they're very open-ended. And that's one of the things that I love about schools is that they try to keep things more open to every single person. Like, because there is no word limit. That's why I say open-ended. The first essay is the goals essay. How will a Booth MBA help you achieve your immediate long-term post-MBA career goals? A very simple open-ended question with a minimum word limit of 250, which means you can go to 1,000, you can go to 2,000, you can go to any you want to, but I usually suggest capping it at 1,500 if you have something important to speak, but 1,000 is basically the sweet spot, that where I don't think you'll need any more words than 1,000 to express yourself. So how exactly will a Booth MBA help you? So the suggested structure here first. First thing you need to remember is the motivation. What exactly is the motivation for you to pursue your goals? An example I can think about this is very simple. Like, let's say a healthcare professional, I've given this example before also. Someone who is working in the technology industry now wants to go in the healthcare tech side. And the reason this person wants to go in the healthcare tech side is because they had a very unfortunate incident in the family where, because of the flaws in the healthcare system, someone lost their life because of the problems which were in the system itself. So this person decided to take it upon themselves, and that was the motivation. That's a very strong motivation because there is a personal association directly with the other person who had to deal with this issue, and you were the person who dealt with the issues yourself also. So that's a decent motivation to have if you want to mention that. And how does that motivation tie to your short-term goal? For this person, the short-term goal was to get into the healthcare tech companies in a corporate level position so that they can actually understand the nitty-gritty things that go on within there. And in the long term, they want to build their own healthcare tech company which can fix these systemic issues. Perfectly fine. So motivation will lead to your short-term goal. So you start with what your motivation is. Your motivation is your motivation. I've just given you an example. It can be anything. You don't have to think that I have to have someone from my family, like, but at the same time, it's all about understanding what matters to that goal. That's basically the idea. So take it to your short-term goal. The short-term goal has to be very specific. We'll get to that in a little bit. And then from the short-term goal, you talk about Booth's resources. What resources at Booth you plan to use that will help you achieve your short-term goal, and it will also help you in the longer run. And then you basically take it to the long-term goals, and that's all that you have to go. So there are a few considerations here. When talking about your goals, you need to narrow down by function, industry, location, transferable skills, etc. So function, basically, let's take an example. Let's say you want to go in consulting. Whatever your motivation is your motivation. So you can write down your motivation for pursuing consulting. Then you have your function first. What exactly will be your function post MBA? Generally, people join at an associate level if the company is hierarchical. If it's different, like for, I think some other companies, it's consultant position. So it's up to you or what position you want to write based on your research. Industry management consulting, obviously. Then we have location, Chicago, Booth, Chicago, feeder location. Obviously, you want to be there. So location wise, you probably are targeting Chicago. Then maybe name the company also, like for example, McKinsey, Bain, BCG, whatever company you're trying to apply to. Then we have the transferable skills. What transferable skills you currently possess that will help you achieve your post MBA goals. That's basically the idea when you're defining your short-term goals. Don't go on an overkill when it comes to the transferable skills. It's not suggested because first thing is when you talk about your transferable skills, if you're going into management consulting and you need an MBA for that, you don't possess as many skills first. Like if you've worked in a client focused industry, that's a transferable skill. If you worked with some data, that is a transferable skills. But if you're talking about engineering skills, if you're talking about all kinds of math skills, STEM skills and all that, not needed. Just focus on the, like, the basic skills that the school cannot give you. And you probably currently possess. You can also talk about your transferable resources, for example. What do I mean by transferable resources is you can also talk about your personal connections in Chicago. Let's say you have some uncle who's working in McKinsey who is like a partner. Why will you hide that information? Just tell them. It's good because it will show that your goal is very feasible because you have personal connections, you have personal associations. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm completely forgetting that there are incidents where people will talk about nepotism in this case. It's not the case. It's about having a resource in hand with you who will guide you on these things. So you don't need a mentor for navigating the consulting industry. You have one in-house. That's basically the idea behind it. The idea is not nepotism. The idea is having some resource, having your back. That's basically the idea. So that's about the goals. You need to have everything very specifically stated for your short-term goal. For your long-term goals, you don't have to be as specific, but you just have to like show them what you see yourself doing in the long run and serving a purpose that you have in mind for yourself. So that's about the goals. Now, I also talked about Booth's resources. So remember a few things here. Narrow down to two resources. So it can be a center, it can be a club, it can be an event that happens at Booth. It can also be like probably a personal network that you will make at Booth. It can be anything, but Booth's resources should be narrowed down to two. No more than two resources should be used in this. So let's say you want to be associated with the sustainability or like the social responsibility center is also there at Booth. I don't know if it's called Rustundi Center or something. I don't know. But there is a center at Booth which is like geared towards social impact. So let's say in the long run, you want to have like this like exposure to social impact consulting because you see this as doing good for like an enduring impact for the society. Perfectly fine. Let's take that as one resource, the center. And then there is the other resource. Maybe it could be a club. So probably the consulting association that they have at booth. You can talk about that as a resource. So you've narrowed those two resources down, which are relevant to your goals. And anything irrelevant to your goals, obviously, you should not be mentioning because it's a goals essay. It's not a resources essay. So narrowed down to two resources. Now you need to have a word limit per resource. So 150 words is the informal limit I give to people per resource. So what exactly should you be focused on when talking about a resource? So you should start with who told you about that resource, and that who has to be a student who is at booth or an alumnus, generally speaking, or a professor, even if you've spoken to one. So who told you about that resource? What was that resource? Name the resource in Booth's terms, because Booth has a very long name for a particular center. Write down the full name. I know, boring, but what can you do? For the first time, if you're introducing a resource, write down the full name, obviously. What was the resource? Why is that resource important to you? So when you say the social impact or like the idea of doing some good for society, it gives you some meaning if you align that with the Center for Social Responsibility and Social Impact. That's okay. I think you should probably show that why is aligned with that center because some activities go on in that center. So that why is exactly the crux of this resource. That why exactly is that resource important to you personally, and how will that aid in your goal? So you have who, what, why, and how will that resource be important to your goals? So far, we have done who, what, why, and how, and then show them how exactly do you plan to give back to that resource while you're extracting some value for yourself also. So that's basically the idea. You're going towards your goal and you're giving back to the community. So focus on the depth, not do not list down the resources that I'll also be involved with this center. I'll also be involved with the other center. I'll also be involved with the club. I'll also be involved with my affinity club. It's not about that. Just narrow down to two resources, talk in depth about who told you about the resource, what the resource was, why is that resource important to you, how exactly will you be using that resource, and how do you plan to give back to that resource, and connect everything to your goals. So two resources, similar format, and then connect that to your long-term goal that in the long run, I plan to utilize these resources so that I can be, I don't know, in social impact consulting, maybe a partner, maybe just like having your own company, whatever works for you. In case of entrepreneurship, I recommend definitely encourage people to write about the Entrepreneurship Center. That's Polsky, I think. Polsky Center for Entrepreneurship. Okay. Then we have the second essay, which is the alignment essay. So it goes something like this. The photos represent some of the values described above that we uphold at Chicago booth. Select one and share how it resonates with one of your own. So remember the keyword slide I shared with you when I said there will be the academic freedom slide, and you can see that in number 2. So that's basically the idea. I told you that you should be able to think and brainstorm about the stories that come in your mind when you look at a particular keyword. But now here they have given you the exact same thing, but now they want you to look at a particular picture and come up with a story that makes more sense. So when you look at the first picture, what exactly do you see? People are celebrating some sort of a success, and it could tie into some excellence attitude. It can also tie into the idea of enduring impact because maybe that sports event has been happening for quite a while. So maybe that's a legacy thing. Not so much academic freedom or like independent thought, but that's basically the idea. Maybe somewhat collaboration. Collaboration is something that's valued. And global mindset, people from all walks of life standing there, many, many diverse people. So that's the first picture. That's what I see. Maybe you see something else that speaks more to you. Brilliant. Bring in your personal side. You are obviously applying for an MBA and you are obviously a smart person. So you should think about your own kind of things that come to your head. Second one is intellectual curiosity, obviously, strategic mindset, how exactly is the Chicago. It's also about Chicago approach. That is the teaching methodology, and it's also about the flexi curriculum because Chicago Booth has a flexible curriculum. So maybe you can talk about those things in the second picture. The third picture is mostly, I think, it's around the affinity clubs. It's around collaboration. It's around those celebratory things that happen at Chicago Booth. Then we have the fourth picture, which is someone handing out a certificate or like a check, like a victory thing that's going on for Booth. So that's enduring impact. You're going to places, you're winning competitions, and you're leaving the legacy, which not many could have left at Booth. So that's something to think about while you're like thinking about these things, that what exactly will this picture mean? Will I be able to participate in some competitions? You can also like talk about what competitions you're looking forward to. If you have network with people, if you've been able to network with Chicago Booth alumni, you will be able to see what exactly are these legacy competitions and how exactly you could contribute and win. Probably there is also probably pitch competition. There are ETA conference that also happens, I think, conjointly with Kellogg. So how will you contribute to these things? So that's the fourth picture, like your contribution to Booth. Interesting, isn't it? So that's the alignment essay. So let's talk about the structure for a little bit. So simple. First thing that you need to say is your value statement and then connect that to the picture. If you've attended the previous session, I already told you what value statement means. Value statement is basically like your personal alignment with the keywords that we just discussed of both, like what keywords speak more to you and what your adjectives are or what qualities you have that define you as a person. So the easiest way to understand what a value statement is basically look at like a product. For example, like shampoo products. We have Head and Shoulders, for example, fairly popular brand. People usually use Head and Shoulders for what? It's known for dandruff. Then we have Dove, which is like very popular brand again, but it's for silky hair. Some like depending on the usage, but they talk about silky and moisturized hair. So that could be like their value statement. So what exactly is your value statement as an MBA student? And then connect that with one of these pictures and why exactly that picture matters most to you. I usually recommend trying to combine fourth and the second one and choose fourth one because like there are elements of collaboration in the fourth one. There is also the Chicago approach. There is also the enduring impact side. There is also like the celebration that is happening, which is also in the first picture. There is also the side of like diverse perspective, which is happening in the third one more. Not perspectives, diverse people and diverse perspectives in the second one. So like fourth one, I think has a very good encapsulation of all the others. So if you play your cards right, it can connect really well. But it's your value statement. I do not wish to interfere in your thought process. You choose which picture you want to. There are four pictures for a reason. Then you give a backstory. When I say backstory, what do I mean? So backstory is something that will connect directly to the picture that I have done something like this in the past. And this is what we did when I was in the undergrad. Back in the day, I went to this competition. We had this collaboration, the people working with their own mindset, their own like ideas, people who are coming from different walks of lives, diverse perspectives are coming in, and that led to the success. Give them a flashback of this story and then connect that to Booth. For example, show them your research. How exactly do you plan to contribute to Booth? What kinds of competitions you will be taking part in? What kinds of clubs or what kinds of events matter more to you? Then connect those dots from your backstory to the Booth story. So backstory comes to the Booth story, and that's how you create that alignment with your pictures. And that's how you explain, like, this is how I plan to contribute at Booth, and this is why that picture means more to me. So that's easy. You start with the value statement, you connect the value statement to the pictures, give them a backstory which gives them a picture of the picture. Weird way of saying that. And then give them a Booth story that this is what I plan to do while I'm at Booth. Simple and straightforward. What more could one ask for? So this was the essay, and now we move on to the resume. And the acronym, if you've attended the previous session, is FCQBG, where the F stands for format. Your resume obviously needs to have some important sections like your name, email address, phone number, and if possible, your LinkedIn profile link on the top. This is usually followed by education, employment, and extracurriculars. While there's no specific format, I still believe that only the most important section should be kept. The space is limited and you only have one page. So just make sure that you utilize it well. Education must list your bachelor's and master's degrees and a very short bullet on what your extracurriculars were during your time there. So the purpose of this section is only to see if you will be involved in a similar capacity in the business school also. So be intentional. If you ever attended a business school session, you must know that they say that the past activities are a great reflection of your future. So that's what matters. I got a lot of questions about how to write your employment if you're also a part-time business owner. It is perfectly fine to separate these sections with work experience in one section and entrepreneurial experience in another section. And I've already ensured to show that in the samples. So you can see it when we get to that. Then there's consistency. By consistency, I mean the consistency in the format of your resume bullet points. The most popular industry format is PARS format, which stands for problem, action, results, and skills used. As the acronym already suggests, you start by defining the problem you're trying to solve. Maybe it's marketing, engineering, maybe it's sales, maybe it's innovation, whatever that is. And the problem that you're trying to solve is to help the business that you're trying to help succeed, your company basically. Move on to define the actions you took to address it and what results came out of that and what skills you used. So actions, results, and skills. Focus on people skills you used in the scenario because for MBA, people skills are the one thing that matter. PAR is just parse format with skills section removed. Simple to understand. It helps shorten the bullet, but skills are blended into the actions itself. So it takes more talent to create PAR format because you have to blend things into actions and then also shorten this. RAS stands for results, actions, and skills, where putting the results first helps you make the impact come first. In case someone is skimming through your resume, they can get surprised as to how you managed to do that. And it makes them more curious, so maybe they will read your resume more. So that's an understanding that many people have. There is no preference for one over the other, but I must tell you that you should not be mixing them all in one resume. Only one consistent for bullet format per resume, which should be PRS, PAR, or RAS, or not and. Remember that. And when you look at the samples, I've actually made errors on purpose. So you can actually spot those errors when you see it, if the resume is consistent in terms of bullets or not. Then there's quantification, which is Q. Most heard of in the MBA admissions industry is the line, your bullets need to be well quantified. So what does that mean? So quantification is usually more or less mandatory in the impact, but it would not hurt to mention the size of the team you led for the particular incident to further give more credibility to your bullets. If you think you don't know how to quantify the bullet, that's okay, no problems with that. Just think about why you exist in the organizations and how exactly is the company using you to make money. And things will start popping up in your head like, I'm just getting paid 3 lakhs and my company is making 3 crores. This is how they're using me. That's great. That's quantification. You're literally saying things in terms of money. So that's what we're looking for. As it says in the slide, you can highlight operational efficiency, revenue increase and sales or whatever with numbers, percentage, cash, etc., depending on what you did. Just remember that you need to enter the currency of the country that you're trying to apply to. For Chicago booth, that would be US dollars. Now, I understand that because of the purchasing power parity and the exchange rate difference, the converted amount may look smaller in dollars. So you can accompany this with percentage change in something to show a greater impact. That brings me to branding. Branding is probably like the most important thing in your entire application, and we'll know why. But the way I explain branding is with this phrase. A hero can rarely be a sage, and a sage can rarely be a rebel. All three have different personalities, as you can already see in the line. So if you think about it, a hero is someone who takes the first step takes the responsibility for the people, solves their problem. People rally behind them because they're responsible, they're solving the people's problems, and people believe in them. There is a trust factor involved. A sage is someone who shares his wisdom and then helps solve people's problems. People rally behind them because of their intelligence mostly. And then we have the rebel, that's someone who disrupts the status quo and creates something completely different from what used to be. The rebellious attitude and uniqueness attracts people who rally behind them because they're way too frustrated with the status quo. So, very different personalities. People trust each of these, people rally behind each of these, but all of them are very different in their own way. So, who is creating an enduring impact? All of them. A rebel creates an enduring impact by challenging the status quo, creating a new system which others follow. Enduring impact. The sage can create an enduring impact by doing what? Solving problems which are more complex, which can have a long term impact on humanity. You're not going to have a very long term impact on humanity because, like, it's just business school. You're not going in politics, but still, like, as a business person, you can still have a very big impact on the society through your business. So that can be there. Then there is the hero, the obvious enduring impact person. So that's basically the idea. Like, what is your personality that has to be reflected very consistently in your essays, your resume, and your LORs. And I'm talking about your people skills here. So, what do I mean by staying consistent in essays, resume, and LOR? So, let me give you an example about this. Let's say your LOR has been written in the brightest possible way. The person who is writing your LOR has given you all kinds of positive feedback, has said all the positive things. And let's say branding wise, they've probably branded you as a sage, like someone who shares the wisdom, knowledge, people rally behind them because of the wisdom. Nothing wrong with that. But let's assume that you branded yourself as probably a rebel, for example. And if you're a rebel and your LOR says you're not a rebel, where exactly is the problem there? Trust. Trust is the biggest problem in this situation. Because how can the business schools trust a person who sees himself or herself differently than what they actually are? So this is where the problem will happen. Another problem that will be is self-awareness. If you're someone who is less self-aware that this is how I'm being perceived by others and this is how I am, that's where you lose points. And you'll not just lose points where you're not self-aware, you'll lose the whole application, which is why branding is important, because branding is where many people slip. Application is crystal clear, everything is perfect, but everything is misaligned, and that's how they get rejected. And Booth, being an M7 and a very selective school, cares about all of these things. And Booth is in a very privileged position to actually reject you for these small things. So every small things matter, every small thing matters, and that's branding. Moving on to goals. We'll keep it short for this. Perhaps the most overlooked part, the goal side, is forgetting that your resume needs to contain transferable skills more relevant to your post MBA goals. Now, here's how you can modify your resume to meet those requirements. So, first, let's take the industry. Let's assume consulting, since you have been doing that for a while now. Then we have like the function that you'll be targeting, mostly like in hierarchical organization, we've discussed associate. Then we have the target company, McKinsey, schools feeder location, predominantly Chicago, but also other locations if you want to. So you have narrowed this down. Once you have narrowed this down, look at the job description by going to the company's website. Then pick out the key skills from the job description and see if your bullet points are matching those skills and plug those in. So if you remember in the consistency, the C, we talked about PARS, RAS, and PAR. So you just have to pick out the skills from your job description that match your bullet point and then plug those skills in. It's the shortest way of handling this. So that way you have shown more, like, transferable skills for your goals. And that's why I didn't ask you to put those skills in your essay while we were discussing the essay number one, is because it will be there in the resume. And another better way of dealing with this is to just use generative AI tools and let them give you the overlapping keywords. I know you must be thinking that I'm asking people to use AI. So no, I'm asking people to use AI as a tool, not to create the entire application or your entire resume bullets. You're just trying to feed your bullet points and the job description to AI and try to find some overlap based on your experience. You're not using that to create the entire resume. It's forbidden and it won't look good on your application if anything gets caught with AI. So try not to use AI to create the entire application, just as a tool is fine. And that completes our session for Chicago booth. And like I told you, a surprise. Little news for you before we move on to the Q&A and samples. MBA Times is offering the Hail Mary service at a discount of 50%. You will only have to pay $250 per school to get personalized one-time feedback on your whole application, from resume and essays to extracurriculars. Every single thing will be covered. And you can use this code, Booth Mega Fair 2025, to avail the offer. We also have bulk discounts should you choose to opt for it. The website will have an option to select the number of schools, so you can scan this QR code on the left and it will take you to the website. Alternatively, you can also visit MBA Times by going to www.mba-times.com/code to request the code yourself. And this offer is limited to the Mega Fair registrants and attendees only. So I hope you guys are registered. And as I promised, while we were on the agenda slide, that I'll give you the scan for the QR code again. So I'm bringing that back. So please scan this and I'll see you in the Q&A session. If there are any other doubts, you can just ask that in the Q&A and I'll just end the stream now.